Good morning, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our speaker today. Dr. Khachik Harutyunyan obtained his doctorate of philosophy from Yerevan State University, working on Armenian philology in 2014. He has been director of the Scientific Research Center for Historical and Cultural Heritage since 2021. This center carries out research and popularization of the Armenian historical and cultural heritage in the Republic of Armenia and in foreign countries. It documents Armenian monuments for research purposes, as well as in order to save them from destruction, a commendable and unfortunately all too necessary aim in current times. This registration of monuments happens through academic publications, archaeological excavations, and the creation and digitization of the scientific database and archive of the Armenian historical and cultural heritage. Also on the website, which is armheritage.am, if you're interested, you can find digital tours of two monastic complexes in Armenia, that of Hakhpat and Sanahim, which I really recommend viewing if you cannot make it to the places themselves. They're absolutely beautiful. Khachik Harutyunyan is also senior researcher at the Manuscripts Matenadaran. He is one of the world's leading experts on Armenian inscriptions and Armenian scribal colophons. He has been working on Armenian inscriptions for several years now, especially on the recording and publication of Armenian inscriptions in Israel and Palestine. Very recently, he published an article on newly discovered inscriptions in the Armenian Cathedral in Jerusalem, and an article on the so-called Door of Hitum, or Armenian door, a wooden door of the Cathedral of the Nativity in Bethlehem, on which there is an Armenian inscription that mentions the king Hitum of Armenian Cilicia. He has also published widely on Armenian scribal colophons in a considerable number of academic publications, mostly in Armenian, but there are some English language publications on his academia.edu page that I encourage you to read. Personally, I think it's also important to mention in this context his contribution to an instructional document developed for researchers at the Matenadaran in 2020, in which he discusses the importance of scribal colophons in manuscripts. I do not think that anyone still takes for granted the rich sources that are manuscript colophons, regardless of which language they were written in. But because of limited knowledge of the Armenian language outside of Armenia, these remain largely hidden to us. To reveal some of their secrets today, I now give the floor to Dr. Khachik Harutyunyan. Please.
Thank you very much, Andy, for this introduction. I'm happy to be here, and thank you very much to joining us this morning. Today I hope to be interesting to speak and to present the Armenian Colophons, or at least a small detail regarding the Armenian Colophons. I will talk about the daily life. Let me share my screen. It's okay? Okay. So, colophons in Armenian manuscript hold a significant and unique place among medieval Armenian written monuments. The information provided by these sources refers to the life of the Armenian people, history, and numerous significant episodes, including interactions with various peoples and ethnic groups throughout history. As a result, these sources have continuously attracted the attention of researchers and scholars interested in understanding the broader context of Armenian history and its connections with other cultures. Before entering into the details, here, sorry. Let me introduce some relevant information about these sources. So the majority of Armenian manuscripts feature colophons. Statistics show that approximately 18% of manuscript, 8 out of 10, include this writing. So colophons can range from a few lines to several pages in length. To understand better the volume of Armenian colophons, it is worth mentioning that since 1915, 12 volumes of Armenian colophons have been published. However, to achieve a comprehensive picture, it is likely that an equal number of volumes still need to be published. Colophons represent a personal space for scribes within the manuscript, where they can freely express their thoughts, concerns, or any other information, irrespective of the manuscript content, whether it's gospel, book of hymns, psalms, lectionary, etc. So along with detailing historical events and figures, the colophons serve as primary sources that offer invaluable insights into the Armenian scriptoria, the manuscript production and the sale process. Participants involved in copying process, such as scribes, miniaturists, correctors, paper or parchment preparators, bookbinders, etc. The colophons are crucial for studying and understanding various aspects of Armenian codicology, as they preserve and pass down detailed information across generations. For example, colophons reveal details such as the average time needed to copy a page of manuscript, even the composition of ink, the cost of paper or parchment, the tools used in writing, etc. So here I just give an example to understand how it how it's done. So here we see 2 pages of the same manuscript copied by the same scribe, very known scribe, by the way, Michael of Sebastia, or Michael, son of Barham. He copied several manuscripts. We know about 30 of them. So very fruitful scribe, by the way. So we see on the margins, on the lower part of the margins, written the dates, for example, of the starting or copying of the 119 recto page. And then we see also scribal notes for 161 recto page. And so we have here 42 pages copied in 57 days. And so the dates are mentioned on the lower part of the margins, and also the name of the scribes. So these are scribal notes, by the way. So we here understand, we can understand the average time for copying for a page. Here, as I mentioned, we have also examples when the scribes mention also the tools used during the copying. On the margins, we see the name of the scribe, in this case also the miniaturist, who is, by the way, is writing, remember the painter of this image, John, known as Bishop by name and not by deed. And here we see some images, some figures of the tools used during the copying, with mentioning names of that tools: the ruler, paper smoother, pen, scissors, knife, etc., and etc. In summary, the most reliable source of information about the creation of a manuscript and its difficulties is the colophon. Here is how he explains scribe Moses in his colophon, written in 1296. Whoever sees the copied book thinks that it was easily created. It's not like that. You have to suffer to the point of death. Why does the scribe Moses describe the act of copying in such a manner? The reason is that scribes often worked under extremely challenging and hazardous conditions. They were frequently disturbed by environmental noise, darkness, cold, various dangers, etc. These adverse circumstances made their work not only difficult, but also perilous. And we see the various aspects of daily life of the time through the eyes of the scribes or the authors of colophons. In 1601, Scribe Grigor wrote in his colophon, oh, how many times we turned around and ran away from the hands of foreigners. It's been 3 years since I started this book, and they don't let it finish. Every year I escape for 2 or 3 months and did not work. How long will I run away? Lord God, help me, I am poor. Where shall I go or where shall I hide? Moving from place to place like this. The scribe could not finish copying the manuscript in time. Another scribe complains about the cold air and noise. The ink always thickens from the cold air, which caused me a lot of trouble, and also a lot of noise around me has led to many mistakes. One of the scribes also complained about the heat of flies. Oh, it was hot and flies wouldn't leave me alone. Naturally, the description of the scribes' daily life and the challenges they faced provides insight into the condition and needs of people during that period. Scribe Thaddeus, who copied a manuscript at the beginning of the 14th century, expressed the desire for every letter of the manuscript he copied to be golden, beautiful, and gilded. However, the difficulties he encountered barely allowed him to complete the book. We read in his colophon, sometimes I suffered from the cold winter, sometimes from the coming and going of Tatars, so the Mongols here. And after the destruction of these places, we became refugees and there was no consolation. I wanted every letter to be gold, but this is all we have. However, it is characteristic that these sources are not only the main informer of the details having to do with the production, the purchase, of the restoration of manuscripts, but also very often they are unique primary sources that give first-hand evidence on social, political events, popular mode of life of the time. In these written sources, one can find references to everyday difficulties, human relations, the high cost of food, hunger, and natural disaster. Discover concerns and fears of medieval men, which are very important for completing our understanding of the Middle Ages. I discussed these questions, and Andy has mentioned the book, and I discussed these questions regarding Armenian colophons in more detail in my book published in 2019. The book is in Armenian and published by Matenadaran, thanks to which it is also open access. Separate chapter is dedicated to the daily life in Armenian colophons. I probably won't be wrong if I say that in Armenian reality, there are no other written sources that present medieval Pole life in more detail, which would surpass the data provided by the Armenian manuscript colophon in this manner. These written monuments were and remain unedited, unique sources revealing the multiple aspects of Armenian life, providing rich material for researchers, such as folk beliefs, holidays, primarily, of course, church-related holidays, food, people's professions, their relationships, everyday concerns, joys, fears, and hopes, elements often absent from the works of historians. Thus, a number of scribes, as an expression of gratitude, in their big and small colophons mentioned with warm words the people who provided food and drink, sometimes specifying the names of the food. In 1201, in a colophon of the manuscript copied in the monastery Avak in Yerzanka, nowadays in Turkey, Hovannes scribe wrote, Martyros, old hermit, came here and brought us a hot azan, which is unleavened bread, as a sign of love. May the Lord reward him. Another colophon says, today the recipients of these, this means the manuscript, Arhun and priest Astratzatu came to us and brought us new and sweet melon. A certain Taguhi, recipient of a manuscript, took a gata for the scribe. May the Lord God forgive the sins of Taguhi who brought us gata. This is a kind of sweet, very famous in Armenia and still common, and one of my lovely sweets, by the way. So we also read in the following text in the famous Gospel of Hachpat, this small text, Sheranik, when you come, bring the fish. So we see this personage, this figure, and here the small scribal notes, or I don't want to call it colophon, but it's perhaps it is correct to say scribal notes. And here we see in the notes written Sheranik, which is the name of this person. When you come, bring the fish. So in 1491, in the Gospel copied in Noradus, not far from the Sevan Lake, Scribe Stepanos mentioned in his small verse colophon a gruel, in Armenian it's chavit, and another food called natani, which is, by the way, unknown to us. And we read in the colophon, today, while we were writing this colophon, we ate a gruel very early. After that, we ate a natani. Scribes who value human relations always mention open-hearted, hospitable, and generous people with kind words. They bitterly document feelings of envy, malice, indifference, and gossip, and even mention individuals who employed them without payment or failed to provide them with food. So, for example, scribe Samuel expressed his gratitude to the recipient Karapet Abera, or monk, who feed him well. Remember the recipient of this Karapet Abera, who feed us very well today. While scribe Bovanes, who was busy copying a Haismavuk, a lectionary, for 2 years in Baresh and elsewhere, complains about human indifference in his colophon written in 1443. I wrote this for 2 years in St. Kyriakos cell and St. George's Chapel, and I didn't even see an apple or a cucumber from anyone, because love disappeared from my Armenian nation, especially from the clergymen. Such records are not rare in Armenian manuscript colophons and provide invaluable insight into the environment of the scribes, their state of mind, and their feelings. Through these records, we also learn about famines and other plagues caused by the high prices of bread and grain crops. In a colophon from 1292, it is mentioned that due to enemy attacks, the fields were neglected and the grain was left unharvested, resulting in a shortage of bread. It was the time of the wheat harvesting. During this period, people abandoned their hard-earned food and means of livelihood, leading to high prices and shortages of bread. In a colophon written in 1605 in the region of Mok, the colophon informs about the prices of basic food products, which had risen sharply, becoming the cause of starvation and death. It is very expensive now. A liter of flour cost 10 shahis, raisins cost 12 shahis, oxen cost 48 shahis, Rice cost 30 shahis. Dosha, which is some fruit syrup still used in Armenia, cost 20 shahis. Wheat cost 80 shahis, 18 shahis, and millet cost 13 shahis. Woe to us! In the land of Sebastia, many resorted to eating their children. And in our country, so in Mok, everyone spent 10 days eating grass and vegetables, with many dying and hunger. From the Colophons, we also learn about various crafts and the individuals who practice them. Here are some examples. So, Lord God, have mercy on Grigor, the linen cloth maker, and his parents. Another one says, Christ, God, through the intercession of your holy gospel, have mercy on Hovannes. Hovannes the priest, David the blacksmith, and Khachik the philosopher. The Colophons mention tailors, bakers, shoemakers, clothmakers, dyers, cutlers, carpenters, and other artisans associated with the manuscript creation or the recipients or scribes family. For example, carpenter's garnik is mentioned in a manuscript where he prepared the board for the book cover of the manuscript. And we read in his colophon, whoever might use this holy gospel, let them remember me, the sinful carpenter garnik, for I labored diligently on this. In some cases, portraits of these artisans are even included in the manuscript, accompanying by the small colophons. So here in this wonderful page, we see carpenter Kyrakos, and here is his colophon, which says the carpenter Kyrakos asked for forgiveness of sins. And we see all the tools he was using during his work. And this is the manuscript we see. Whoa. Numerous colophons also provide information about agricultural work, including farming and animal husbandry, which are key indicators of household organization. They mention farmers, gardeners, and others involved in these activities. In the colophon written in 1487, we read about the Mahtesi chauffeur. Mahtesi, by the way, a person who made a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. So we read about the Mahtesi chauffeur the following words. He is a gardener and a very kind worker, and a kind and good Christian, church-loving and poor-loving, and full of much kindness. Colophons in Armenian manuscripts also frequently note natural disasters such as droughts, crop damage by animals, earthquakes, severe cold weather, etc. Here are some examples. It was written in the country of Mok, in the city of Shata, in 1491, a harsh time when the earth shook in the spring. Another one says, in 1611, an earthquake occurred near the city of Amid. Armenian historical sources reveal that the earthquake in Garni, this is a region, this is a village in the central part of Armenia, and very well known by its pagan temple, Garni temple. So in Garni, in 1679, this earthquake destroyed many churches and monasteries, not only in Garni itself, but also throughout the Ararat Valley and Yerevan. And while these sources, the historical sources, describe the destruction of buildings, one colophon from the same period presents the human tragedy and pain caused by the earthquake in Yerevan. So we read in the colophon, parents and children were crying and screaming there. The mourning and sorrow of loved ones and relatives were visible there. They were mourning and groaning, and there was no one to help them. They were turning around and digging here and there with their hands, and their hearts could not stand it. However, they were regaining strength from mourning and were continuing to dig the stones and earth by hands. One of the scribes recorded the damage caused by locusts. This year, there were many locusts in our country, and they ate all the green plants. And he continues, locusts ate all the grass and consumed and destroyed all the crops sown. Cattle are dying and farmers are losing their earnings. Besides this, the colophons also reflect folk beliefs and prejudices through curses, blessings, and individual stories. Armenian colophons are particularly rich in curses and blessings, primarily intended to protect the manuscript. Curses were directed not only at those who stole or damaged the manuscript, but also at individuals who cut, altered, or falsified the colophons in any way. Sometimes earlier names in the colophons were scratched out, erased, or covered with new names added in their places. The authors of the colophons believed that by doing so by adding their names in the colophon, so their names were recorded in the book of life. Some even paid scribes to ensure their names were included. This practice is described in a colophon from 1310. So brothers, be aware that some have a habit of erasing previous names and writing their own. This practice is wrong. I am begging you not to do that great evil. If a name deserves to be recorded, let it be added elsewhere without removing the previous one. Anyone who dares to erase a name will be removed from the book of life, whoever he is, old or young. But as we see in these examples, despite numerous curses and warnings, this practice continued to occur regularly. So here we see the covering of previous colophons with small paper and adding new names. And here in this second example, we see just erasing the previous name, which is, by the way, readable, and we see the name Astvatsatur. And here a new name, which is Alexan. So this bad habit still was continuing during the Middle Ages. The stories associated with the manuscript and their miracles are also reflected folk life and beliefs. Many manuscripts are presented as healers of disease and fulfillers of requests. According to tradition, these manuscripts often undergo various tests, frequently involving elements such as water, fire, or dreams. Here is an example from a colophon dated 1371. We're reading the colophon. In 1371, the Persians came and captured Berkeri, nowadays is Muradiye in Turkey, looted and captured the Holy Red Gospel. It flew from the captor's arms and fell into the river, and no one knew about it for 4 years. Then he appeared in the dream of the lamplighter, and the lamplighter came and told me, "Sinful Lord Simon." And I went to the wall of Lord Huskan's son. We entered the church, we prayed until the morning. After the service, we all went to the riverbank and saw a new miracle. The water of the river moved aside. The Holy Gospel appeared on the top of the stone. We took out the Holy Gospel and it healed all the sick, blind, and demon-possessed among the people. Miraculous manuscripts, especially the Gospels, were objects of worship to which people went on pilgrimage in the Middle Ages. Interestingly, this tradition continues in some way, and even today, people go to the shrine and worship the manuscript. It is still alive, this practice, so people are going to worship in, and the Zoravor, which means mighty, Gospel, and Gospel of Shuishkan are known for their healings even today, which have their covenant days and continue to distribute their power to believers. People made every effort to record their names in the colophons, often providing even minimal support to scribes in the hope that their names would be remembered in the book of life, so in the colophon, and there be secure their soul's salvation. In 1281, priest Mchitar prepared a paper for the scribe to ensure his name would be included in the scribe's colophon. And we read exactly in that colophon that information. Also remember priest Mchitar, who prepared a paper in the hope that his name would be mentioned in this writing, in this colophon. Here we see a good example of this. So for the same purpose, Armenian colophons frequently record not only the names of scribes, recipients, miniaturists, donors, and commissioners, but also their family members. As a result, these mentions of thousands of names provide a wealth of data on personal names and offer insights into the Armenian family structures of the time, including the number of family members and their relationships. In this miniature, we see the family of recipients or commissioner Hovannes the monk or Hovannes priest, Hovannes priest, his wife, and his son. And here, on the lower part of this wonderful miniature, it is written that please go open and read the main colophon. So here just they are mentioned by the names and they are always asking for forgiveness for the sins, but they have also a big colophon, a main colophon, where their names and everything related to their family or just what they did are mentioned. So, and it is very interesting that here is written that go open and read our colophon. By examining numerous examples of everyday spoken language in colophons, including words and expressions used by their authors, we can gain deeper insight into the lives of medieval Armenians. This includes understanding their education, reading habits, and social environment. Some authors of colophons introduced or used words and phrases in their colophons that are still unknown to Armenian dictionaries. So they became just word creators. In my book, published in 2022, I tried to identify the linguistic features of these written sources. At the end of the book, there is a vocabulary which contains more than 1,000 words which are not being registered in any dictionary so far. This phenomenon indicates that the authors of colophons were quite learned and also active word creators. Certainly, the volume of Armenian colophons is vast, allowing for detailed discussion of many episodes, but that would really take days. Therefore, I will conclude by emphasizing that colophons are among the most important sources for understanding the history and various aspects of daily life of the Armenian people. Thank you very much for your attention. I tried to be in time.
Thank you very much to our speaker for this illuminating and lively presentation involving lots of examples and nice images. And the floor is now open for questions. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your virtual hand or write your question in the chat. And perhaps to start us off, I could ask you, if I may, you showed us the collaborative processes of the production of the manuscripts, in which really there was a team effort, and you mentioned, for example, a priest, a blacksmith, and a philosopher together. And so I was curious if this collaboration in making manuscripts, is this also visible in the use of the manuscripts? So would this suggest, for example, that artisans might also have owned the manuscripts or read them or used them? Or would rather ownership and use of the manuscripts have been restricted, perhaps to priests or to more elite circles?
Thank you very much for the question. I try to editate, to enter into all the details of scribal practices or detailing the tools and how they copied manuscript, just giving some examples. But the collaboration between several artisans and several peoples are very well presented in the Armenian Colophons. So we see how the manuscript, how the idea of copying was just born, and then we see the process of copying, and at the end, in some manuscript colophons, we are able even to see how they thought to keep the manuscript, whether they want to keep in the monastery or sale to whoever wants to read or to have just it. I'm not able to say that everyone who had a manuscript was able to read it, but at least we know that many of them were able to write at least their names. So they were learned. So lots of information we can gain from the colophons.
Fantastic, thank you. It's interesting to hear about this possibly wider dissemination. I believe there is also a question by Albert.
Thank you very much for your beautiful talk. I had a question: is there a structure? Is there a difference between East and West Armenia colophons? And is there a difference in age of colophons and the content?
Sorry, age of?
Can you make a difference in the age of a colophon and the content of a colophon?
Between Western and
more religious or less religious or something like that through the ages.
Yeah, and differences between the Eastern and Western Armenia, you mean?
And also, is there a difference between Western and Eastern Armenia?
So the earliest colophon, dated colophon, I mean, in Armenian, it's coming from 9th century. So it's 862 and 887.
Yeah.
The first one is a small scribal notes, let's call it that.
Mhm.
But the second one, 887, is already contain. It's already consists of several pages.
Okay.
And is really very informative.
Okay.
And we have colophons, which are really written as a history, not just sample colophon. Remember, simple, I don't know, this scribe or that miniaturist, but the history of its time, of its period.
Okay.
That's why we have volumes of colophons published. And as I mentioned, so we still need to publish another 12, at least 12 volumes of colophon to have the whole picture. So this is very particular thing for Armenian manuscript. We know about all manuscripts or in different tradition, in different languages, but this volume is very important. So, as you mentioned, there is no special differences between the ages, but this we can see the scribes who even wrote some proses as colophons. So they wrote their colophons in verse. They know any difference starting from early 9th century until the beginning of 20th century. This was the same practice.
Thank you very much.
And no differences between Western and Eastern Armenian scribes.
Okay, thank you very much.
The next question is by David, please.
Khachik, thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question related to the practice of erasing names from colophons. There is this famous case of Philip of Antioch, whose name, the king of Cilicia, whose name was erased from colophons. Have you found other cases when scribes erase names of Armenian kings?
No, that examples also exist in my book published in 2019. So where the name of Philip was erased, but this is and we know the historical background why it was erased, and now it will take time to explain why it happened. There is no other example of erasing name of king, but we have an example, a good example of erasing a name of Catholicos from an inscription. This is very good example. We have other examples, of course, of others. We saw 2 examples, and this is very, unfortunately, very bad habit, but we have many witnesses of this. But the erasing of name of a king, that is the unique example. And one example, we have erasing of the place name, which was the Rome, by the way. And it is always interesting. I will not tell the big background because, yeah. But we have several examples of erasing the names. That's all.
The next 2 questions are first by Armenian Colophons and then by Gabriel Rabo.
Okay, thank you, Khachik. Thank you very much. I just worried about the when you described that they were starving and they, among other things, they ate also grass. Are you sure that you translated it's what word is in Armenian? It's grass or herbs, because we have more than 50 types of herbs, eatable herbs, which we do until now, even that we are not sometimes in a extreme condition, but also in extreme condition, like people in Karabakh recently were separated. These herbs help them survive. So do you mean
this is a good, thank you very much for the question, and very good question. I thought about this. Perhaps in this case it would be very natural if we translate it like green, and that's all. Not because sometimes it is not so clear what is it. There is a vegetable which is mentioned in Armenian banjareven, so I freely used this translation, which is correct. But for the kanach or for the hot, we are not sure to translate it as herbs, because herb is also has several meanings. Maybe just green, or I don't know. I'm not sure for the translation, and I will not, so it's not the topic of discussion at this moment. But if someone to translate the Colophons should, of course, enter into these details and see how is correct to translate, what is the right way to translate the words. Thank you.
Gabriel Dabo, please.
Thank you very much. Do you have any information in the Armenian manuscripts about the Syrians, or are there Syrians who have copied Armenian manuscripts? I sometimes see Armenian entries in the Syriac manuscripts. For example, in a 15th century manuscript in my village in Turabdin. It is the Mimre of Mor Yaakov of Seruh.
Thank you very much for this interesting question. I know some examples when Armenians copied, Syriac manuscripts. I read several articles, but unfortunately, I don't know yet an example of copying Armenian manuscript by a Syriac man or Syriac scribe. There are several examples of colophons written in Georgian. This is early examples, and the colophons perhaps were written, or the manuscript was copied, I'm not sure, by a Georgian man. Not sure about that, but I don't know any example of a Syriac scribe's example. Many my colleagues will be able to say something else, but in the colophons, in the volumes of the colophons, we don't have any witness of this example, of this kind of mention.
Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, there also is a quick question in the chat by Jana. Would you like to elaborate? Otherwise, the question is about the evidence of the colophons in relation to Jerusalem inscriptions left by pilgrims.
Yeah, this is really thank you, Jana, for this question. And I think it's very interesting. And you also will be interested in this. We started working on Armenian inscriptions on the Holy Land. I started to work on this topic since 2019, while Iana Chechanovets and Professor Michael Stone were involved in this research several years. While I was studying these inscriptions, I found several pilgrims who just left graffiti in Holy Sepulchre or in other holy places, let's say, who also copied manuscripts. So they were not sample pilgrims, they were just scribes who were copying manuscript. And while they were in the Holy Land, they copied manuscript, and also they left graffiti or inscriptions in in holy places. And there is one very good example from early 14th century, Stepanos Yerevan, the name of this scribe, who left a graffiti on one of the pillars at the entrance of the Holy Sepulchre. But we know about 4 manuscripts copied by him, and we were able to even to map his travelings, also his travels from Holy Land to Armenian Kingdom to Cilicia, then back to Jerusalem, then back to again Cilicia. So this was very interesting, this practice. So how the scribes were traveling and copying during this travels and during these trips and pilgrimage, between the travels and pilgrimage, let's say. This is very good examples.
Thank you very much. And there are also questions by Andy and by Georgia. Perhaps, Andy, could I turn to you first?
Okay. Thank you very much, Khachik. It's a fascinating talk. Lovely, amazing information, and also the pictures are amazing, of course, of the Armenian manuscripts. I have 2 questions, one a bit more silly and the other one more serious. I'll start with the silly question. I think you mentioned that some colophons also mentioned gossip, but you didn't give an example. Did you, or did I mishear you? So I'm just curious. An example of that.
I have several examples of that kind of things also, because this is daily life. So the people felt free to write something in their colophons, and some I just at this moment I remember an example of a monk who was copying a manuscript in the monastery of Yerevan. This is in Vayostor region in Armenia, and he was saying something about his brotherhood, about what is happening there, and he was very sad to see this kind of thing. So this is very, very important information also to understand how the monastic life also was, let's say, composed, and how the relationships between brotherhood, etc., etc. Yeah, there is examples, of course.
Okay, and then my second question, I really love the sort of from the Armenian tradition. I'm not sure if that exists in any other traditions where you have these publications, these books which collect these colophons, these modern publications. Certainly from the Syriac side, we don't have any of this, which I'm really frustrated about, because we have a huge number of very important colophons, which are sometimes published in catalogs, but partially, and it really depends on the interest of the publisher. So from your perspective as a specialist on Armenian colophons, do you have any advice for, let's say, from the Syriac side, or maybe from the Greek? I don't even know if for the Greek that exists, what kind of approach should be taking? Is it the chronological one that exists from the Armenian side? Should it be another one? And what are the sort of the problems that you can imagine? Just very briefly, you don't need to, doesn't need to be a very long answer, but just curious from your perspective, what kind of advice would you give?
The collection of Armenian colophons started in 19th century. So we have travelers who in their accounts noted also the colophons, because they understood the importance of these written sources. And academic, let's say, study of the Armenian colophons started in, as I mentioned, since 1950. So until now, we are collecting and publishing the colophons. So this is some kind of work which should be started today, and I think continue for several generations. So this is what can I say? So for every tradition, I mean, the colophons should be done, I think, the same. So there is nothing to just find out or something to mention specially. We publish it chronologically and separately from the manuscript. We publish it also in the catalogs. This is to not confuse. Though in the description of the manuscript, I mean the catalogs of Armenian manuscript contains the same colophons, but the colophons itself as written sources are published separately and in an academic way, with annotations, with everything. So this is, I think, very important thing which we have, and I would like to see also in other traditions as well.
Thank you for this also wider comparative, addressing this wider comparative note. And Georgia, could I turn to you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for this rich and fascinating talk. I actually have two outsiders questions, so forgive me if they are rather silly also. I was wondering, you showed us what is peculiar about the content of Armenian colophons, but if there's something peculiar or characteristic of the materiality, like the mise en page, the form the colophon take on the page, like are they written in red ink or connection with the images? And the other is more of a curiosity than a question, is whether you found evidence of scribes copying more than one manuscript at a time. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. If you have just 1 minute, I will find an example in just a minute. I would like to share it with you. Just okay. Okay, here it is. Okay. Do you see this page? Do you see the page?
Yes, yes, we do.
Okay.
We do.
This is a page of manuscript kept in Matenadaran, which is very important to understand how the colophon also worked. So I think we have to yet study the colophon itself, why it is why we have this volume of colophon and why it was so important for Armenian manuscript. As I have mentioned, we have about 80% from, or 8 out of 10. So this is a very huge number of colophons. And this is an example of colophon, let me say a formula of a colophon from 15th century manuscript. Here is written the colophon itself. So we see all the words is well known from all the colophons, so the formula of the colophon. But here I will do like this and hope that you see it. So here we see this, the words, which is, I believe you don't read in Armenian, but here there are 3 points, and here also 3 points, and in other places also we have 3 point series. So here is written the names which should be later changed. So here you have to mention this person, and this person is not mentioned here. You have to pay, so the manuscript was copied in this region. Here in this, we have to later add the place of copying. So by the patronage of this person, this also is not written, and like this. So I would like to say that we have also witnesses, even not many, but witnesses of several colophon structures, which I believe was some kind of guide how to write a colophon, because it was very important to write, so the people should know how to write it. And we have lots of examples when the author of colophon was writing that I didn't know how to write a colophon. So forgive me, because I wrote this colophon not following to traditional ways of writing of colophon. So this is something very interesting also. Sometimes there are, especially in the school of Vaspurakan, which is close to the Lake Van, currently in Turkey, in oriental part of Turkey. Here we have lots of miniatures accompanied by scribal notes and also small colophons. This was a tradition which was very common, especially in these schools. So something which should be studied yet, and I believe that we will be able to do that. I don't know. At least I hope.
As a final, very brief element of our current Q&A session, there's a comment by Gabriel in the chat.
In the chat.
Gabriel, would you like to?
Can you please tell me what kind of entry is in the manuscript? This is absolutely Armenian writing. If you have a good photo of this, or you can
no,
you can
I
send
don't
it.
have a better.
Oh.
I don't have a better picture. It is from microfilm.
Yeah, just a minute. I am writing my email address. You can just
Okay.
send it to me.
Thank you.
I'll try to read it and send it to you back.
Thank you very much.
So our TeTra conversation can continue after the confines of in this hour. And perhaps on that note, we can all join in thanking our speaker for this really lovely presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much also for your attention.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for joining. See you next time.
Yes, thank you so much for joining.